start with the tracing app. Are you going to be downloading it?
I think the bigger question is if the government can't get its own members to use it, what faith would the broader public have in using this tracing app? I mean, in theory, it would make sense to be able to have something like this in place to be able to speed up the way in which we're tracking movements of people to the point that we can reduce the spread of COVID. But there are obviously privacy issues and safeguards that are to be required. But if, like before, you had Barnaby Joyce on your program saying he won't use it and others expressing doubts about it, it demonstrates that none of the assurances this government can provide on privacy, if they don't satisfy their own MPs, why should they satisfy the public?
Well, we did hear Barnaby Joyce say he hasn't had a briefing yet on those, so he'll get that briefing. It's not that they haven't been satisfied, certainly not yet at least. What are your red flags for this? You know this sector well, so without their opinions, you've made your point on that, and that's fair enough. What do you think the issues might pop up where you wouldn't download it?
I think the biggest assurance that has to be provided by the government surrounds privacy. It needs to ensure that the data that is generated through the app is only used for the purpose that everyone's been told it's being used for, and that is to help prevent the spread of coronavirus in Australia, and that we can track where people have been infected so that we can better deal with those outbreaks. We should have not only an assurance about that, but we should, for example, have ironclad commitments that none of the data generated through the app is on-sold to third parties, and that if anyone else is going to use the data, for example, health researchers, that there's also a guarantee that the data is anonymised as well. So there's a whole range of different applications stemming or uses of that data stemming from the app itself that would need to have some detail provided. But again, the government hasn't done it, and they don't really have the best track record when it comes to digital.
Well, the government hasn't done it yet, but details are to come. So if those caveats are met, will you be downloading the app?
Well, I think, and I've said this elsewhere, in terms of the greater good, we should be using these apps if we've got those assurances in place, so that, again, we've got not only better management or taking on coronavirus in Australia, but that we can also potentially look at lifting or easing some of the restrictions in the way that people are keen to do. But the government can't be all talk and little action on this. I mean, I think we're tired of getting announcements being made and then wondering what the detail will be and then seeing them, potentially not go ahead. And I've got to say, if Stuart Roberts, the person that's oversighting all this, I think a lot of us are going to need convincing that this app's going to work properly.
So you need convincing. I know you said we should download it for the greater good, but you personally, what way are you leaning?
No, I just said I think for the greater good. I mean, I would definitely use it. I mean, look, a lot of the apps that we have right now on our phones, if you use Google Maps, for example, and location services are on, there is a lot of data that's being generated by a lot of the apps that we use at the moment. So, I'm sort of I have a very practical view about this. But again, I think, it's not just about me as an MP, it's about the government providing assurance to the public, and that's really important.
You're calling a Labor and you are calling for a royal commission into the Ruby Princess cruise ship. What will that uncover that the police inquiry and the special commission of inquiry can't cover?
Those two inquiries that you mentioned are focused primarily on New South Wales. We have a cross-border event here, nearly 700 cases, 20 people unfortunately lost their lives as a result. We had like a 1 in 10 contribution of this. The people that were infected on the Ruby Princess went out to the public and created a 1 in 10 increase in the number of COVID cases in the country, and we've had very little accountability from the government. I mean, it's one thing for this government to be pushing for international inquiries on the management of coronavirus globally, but on the biggest issue where people want to find out why what happened on the Ruby Princess occurred, they have not done anything in terms of accountability. And I think it's definitely incumbent on this government to explain what the hell happened with Ruby Princess and what's going to be done to avoid this happening. And I think the general public are hopping mad about this issue, rightly so, and they're demanding answers. And I think a Royal Commission is the proper way to do this.
Well, you mentioned the focus on New South Wales. The Special Commission of Inquiry spells out it will look into communications, decisions and actions of Commonwealth and New South Wales agencies. It specifically mentions Home Affairs. So what won't it cover that you say a Royal Commission will?
Well, we've got a number of federal and state agencies that were involved. As I said before, it was a cross-border issue, and I don't suspect that the Commonwealth government would just take it that one state-based level of inquiry should be enough. I think that we should have a federal-based inquiry on this. Again, if royal commissions can be managed or kicked off on government-based or federal government initiatives, for example, what we saw with the home insulation scheme that this coalition government enacted, they should definitely be doing the same on this.
But I mean, New South Wales and the federal government have had a bit of a blame game. Clearly, New South Wales wants to look at the Commonwealth role in all of this, and the Special Commission of Inquiry says they will.
So what's the federal government hiding? Why are they so worried about not calling for a federal, either an independent
why
inquiry
have one
at the
when there's
federal
already
level
one going
or a royal commission? No, look, Tom, that is a state-based inquiry looking at what the feds did. The feds would be better placed to be able to investigate what has happened in terms of from a border force perspective, from a Department of Agriculture and biosecurity perspective, and looking at how this impacted a number of states. And importantly too, I might add, the level of infection that occurred as a result of this and the resultant restrictions and changes that were made at the federal government level, you can ask the question, did we need to do as much as we did in slowing down activity across the nation through restrictions because of what happened as a result of mismanagement of the Ruby Princess? We've got a cruise operator, federal and state agencies that have to answer questions, and we should have an inquiry looking into it.
Ed Husic, always appreciate your time. Looks like a windy day, but a nice shot there for us. Thank you.